In this series, we're going to take a look at the events leading up to the Battle of Forts Henry and Donelson. We'll start with the building of the forts and end with the aftermath of the capture of Fort Donelson. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so, that way you won't miss out on any of these videos. Be sure to like the video and leave a comment letting me know what you think. In May of 1861, just a month after the Battle of Fort Sumter, Tennessee Governor Isham Harris became concerned with the state. After all, with Kentucky declaring its neutrality, Tennessee became a border state and would be one of the first states invaded by the Union Army in the West. If Union forces took position on the Tennessee or Cumberland rivers, they could divide the state into 3 sections and have access to the Deep South. Governor Harris appointed Tennessee Attorney General Daniel Donelson to choose sites on these rivers to build forts. Typically, politicians are given high rank in militias, but Donelson had some military experience. He is a West Point graduate, graduating 5th in the class of 1825. He was assigned to the 4th Artillery, but resigned his commission after 6 months. Later, he would join the Tennessee militia as a major and work his way up the ranks to brigadier general. The first site chosen for a fort was on the west bank of the Cumberland River. Donelson chose it and was approved by Colonel Bushrod Johnson of the Tennessee militia. Johnson was a West Point graduate himself of the class of 1840, graduating 23rd in his class, assigned to the 3rd Infantry, and saw action in the Mexican-American War. Resigning at the end of the war, he eventually became a professor at the Western Military Institute. Major William Foster, an engineer detached from the 1st Tennessee Infantry, and a civilian engineer, Adna Anderson, began construction on the fort. Initially, the construction was performed by the men from the nearby Cumberland Iron Works. Artillery batteries were placed facing the river to deal with any river boats making an attack. To help with this effort, markers were placed every 100 meters upriver, going the effective distance of the cannons. This would help aim the shots at the ships. Earthworks were made around the fort, which the infantry would use to defend against an attack. With the first site chosen, Donelson and his survey team moved west to find a spot for a fort on the Tennessee River. He found a spot, but it was very close to the river and in the middle of a swamp. When the river rose after a rain, this spot would flood about 2 feet. Major Foster and Engineer Anderson objected to the site, but Colonel Johnson overrode the objection and approved the site for what would become Fort Henry. If the engineers had made a foundation of about 5 feet or so, the flooding would not have been an issue. This would have actually helped in the battle with the river boats because the cannons would be able to shoot down at the boats. But these sites were neglected and more attention was given to Columbus, Kentucky and Vicksburg, Mississippi. Strategically, it was a good site. The location had a 2-mile view upriver, had room for multiple rows of rifle pits, and 12 miles from Fort Donelson. So the 2 sites could support one another if one was attacked. Donelson's thought process here was that only one fort would be attacked at a time. So if the forts were properly manned, which they weren't, then they could come to the aid of each other. Work was steady for a month or so, then it went to a standstill. Once General Albert Sidney Johnston took command, he stopped at the river forts during the tour of his department. He ordered that Fort Hyman be built across the river from Fort Henry and gave other instructions, such as obstructions be placed in the river and a chain be stretched across the river. Fort Hyman was basically 2 redoubts on a cliff overlooking Fort Henry. It would be able to take better shots at an opposing navy and any land force attacking Henry than what Henry itself could do. Unfortunately, even less effort was put into Hyman than Henry. The terrain for Hyman was perfect for defense, and if properly manned, should be able to fight off an attacking division. In December 1861, Brigadier General Lloyd Tilghman was appointed commander of the river forts. Tilghman was a West Point graduate of the class of 1836, graduating 46th in his class of 49, earning a position in the 1st Dragoons. He resigned shortly thereafter, but came back to service in the Mexican-American War, serving as a volunteered aide-de-camp to Brigadier General David Twiggs This service period covers the major battles of their southern campaign, giving him experience at the division level. Tilghman's army, more accurately a division, consisted of 3 brigades, with approximately 4,900 troops assigned to the 3 river forts. Colonel Adolphus Hyman had command of the 10th Tennessee, 26th and 27th Alabama regiments. Colonel Joseph Drake had command of the 4th Mississippi, 15th Arkansas, and the 51st Tennessee. While that was how those 2 brigades were administratively organized, Colonel Hyman had the 15th Arkansas and the 27th Alabama with him at Fort Hyman. Colonel Drake had the 4th Mississippi, 10th Tennessee, 26th Alabama, and the 51st Tennessee with him at Fort Henry. Colonel John W. Head was the garrison commander at Fort Donelson. His brigade consisted of the 30th, 49th, and 50th Tennessee regiments. These conditions were discovered by Union Brigadier General Charles Ferguson Smith on January 21, 1861, and he sent a report of his findings to his commanding officer at the Department of Cairo, Brigadier General Ulysses S. Grant, who forwarded the report to his commanding officer at the Department of Missouri, Major General Henry Halleck. With that, General Halleck and General Grant began preparing for the attack on the river forts.